I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd burn down her own daughter's life. But when your 10-year-old granddaughter grabs your hand with trembling fingers and whispers the words that shatter everything you believed about your family, you learn that revenge isn't always about hatred. Sometimes, it's about love so fierce it'll destroy you both. Before I tell you what happened that day when little Emma begged me to run, before I explain why I'm 72 years old and sitting in a new apartment 3 states away from everything I've ever known, I need you to understand something. Comment below and tell me where you're watching this from, because I need to know I'm not alone in this world anymore. I need to know that somewhere out there, people still believe that protecting the innocent matters more than protecting your own blood. And if this story moves you, if it makes you think about the secrets hiding in your own family, please subscribe. Not for me, but for Emma. Because her story needs to be heard, and your support is the only way I can keep telling it without my daughter finding us. Let me start by painting you a picture of my daughter, Cassandra. Not Cassie, never Cassie. She corrected people on that from the time she could speak. Cassandra Wells, 43 years old, with the kind of sharp beauty that turns heads and the business acumen that had built her marketing firm from nothing into a 7-figure empire. She lived in a pristine colonial house in the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, drove a white BMW that she washed every weekend, and had never missed a parent-teacher conference for Emma. From the outside, she was everything a mother could want in a daughter. Successful, beautiful, seemingly devoted to her child. I'd spent years bragging about her to the other women at my book club, showing off photos of her latest business awards, her perfectly landscaped garden, Emma's honor roll certificates. But you know how they say that the most dangerous predators are the ones that look the most harmless? The ones that blend in so perfectly that you never see them coming? I moved in with Cassandra 3 years ago, after my husband Frank died suddenly of a heart attack. 68 years old, and suddenly I was alone in a house that felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories. Cassandra insisted I come live with them. She had the space, she said. Emma needed her grandmother close. It would be good for all of us. And for a while, it was. Emma and I developed this beautiful relationship. She was 8 when I moved in, this bright, curious little girl with her father's gentle brown eyes and her mother's sharp intelligence. Emma's father, Marcus, had died in a car accident when she was barely 2. I'd never known him well. Cassandra had married him quickly, divorced him even quicker, and then he was gone before Emma really knew him. So it was just the 3 of us women in that big house. Cassandra working her 12-hour days, building her empire. Me, trying to be useful, cooking meals that Cassandra barely touched, helping Emma with homework, reading her bedtime stories. And Emma, caught between a mother who was never really present and a grandmother who was maybe trying too hard to fill the gaps. The first sign something was wrong came about 6 months after I moved in. I'd gotten up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and I heard this sound coming from Emma's room. Not crying, exactly. More like whimpering. Soft and scared and trying to be quiet. I knocked gently on her door, but she called out that she was fine, just had a bad dream. When I checked on her the next morning, she seemed normal. Bright smile, chattering about her school project, asking if I could help her make a volcano for science class. But I started paying attention. And once you start really looking, really listening, you see things you wish you'd never noticed. Emma flinched when Cassandra touched her. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. Just this tiny recoil, so quick you'd miss it unless you were watching. Cassandra never seemed to notice, but I did. I started cataloging these moments in my mind, telling myself I was being paranoid, that grief and old age were making me see shadows where there weren't any. Emma stopped wanting to have friends over. When I asked why, she'd shrug and say her mom didn't like noise in the house. But the few times classmates did come by, I noticed how Emma seemed nervous the entire time, like she was waiting for something bad to happen. She started having trouble sleeping. I'd find her in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, sitting at the table with a glass of milk, staring out the window. When I'd ask what was wrong, she'd just say she couldn't turn her brain off. And Cassandra started traveling more for work. Business trips that seemed to happen whenever there was a school event, a holiday, anything that required her to be present as a mother. She'd leave these detailed schedules for me, instructions about Emma's meals, her bedtime routine, her medication schedule. Wait. That's important. Emma's medication schedule. See, according to Cassandra, Emma had anxiety issues. Started when she was 7, around the time I was considering moving in with them. Emma needed these little blue pills twice a day to help her stay calm, help her focus. Cassandra showed me the prescription bottle. explained how important it was that Emma never miss a dose. But here's the thing about being 72 years old and having raised 4 children of my own. You develop instincts. And my instincts were screaming that something was terribly, horribly wrong. I started watching more carefully. I noticed that Emma was different on the days when Cassandra was traveling. More animated, more curious, more like the little girl she should have been. She'd laugh louder, ask more questions, want to go places and do things. But as soon as Cassandra came home, Emma would shrink back into herself, becoming quiet and compliant and eerily mature for her age. One evening, about 2 years after I'd moved in, Cassandra was packing for another business trip. 3 days in Atlanta, she said. Some big client presentation. Emma was in her room, supposedly doing homework, but I could see her through the crack in the door, just sitting on her bed, staring at nothing. I knocked and went in, sat down beside her on the pink comforter she'd outgrown but was afraid to ask to replace. "You seem sad, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. Emma looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes that made my heart stop. It was the look of someone much older than 10, someone who'd learned to carry secrets too heavy for small shoulders. "Grandma," she said quietly, "do you think some people pretend to be good when they're really bad?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, honey?" But she just shook her head, pulled away from me, and said she needed to finish her math homework. That night, after Cassandra left for the airport at 5 in the morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to stop giving Emma those little blue pills and see what happened. What happened was that for the next 3 days, I watched my granddaughter come alive. Really, truly come alive for the first time since I'd known her. She slept through the night. She ate breakfast without me having to coax her. She asked if we could go to the park, if we could call her friend Sarah, if we could bake cookies and make a mess in the kitchen. She laughed at my terrible jokes and danced around the living room to old Motown records. And then Cassandra came home. Within hours, Emma was back to being quiet, compliant, distant. Cassandra noticed immediately that Emma seemed overstimulated and anxious, and made a point of personally giving Emma her evening medication, watching to make sure she swallowed it. That's when I knew. That's when the terrible truth started crystallizing in my mind like ice forming on a window. The medication wasn't helping Emma's anxiety. The medication was causing it. And my daughter, my beautiful, successful, perfect daughter, was systematically drugging her own child. But I didn't know why. I didn't know the full extent of what was happening. I didn't know that what I'd discovered was just the tip of an iceberg that would eventually sink everything I thought I knew about my family. If you've ever had that moment when you realize someone you love is not who you thought they were, you know the feeling I'm talking about. It's like the ground disappearing beneath your feet. It's like learning to breathe underwater. It's like discovering that up is down and black is white and everything you've built your understanding of the world on is a lie. I was about to learn that feeling intimately, because 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in October, Cassandra was going to board a plane for what she said was the most important business trip of her career. And my 10-year-old granddaughter was going to grab my hand with trembling fingers and whisper the words that would finally make me understand why she'd been asking me about people who pretend to be good when they're really bad. After I stopped giving Emma the pills, I became a detective in my own home. Every day Cassandra was at work became an opportunity to gather evidence, though I wasn't even sure what kind of evidence I was looking for. I started in Cassandra's home office, a pristine room with white furniture and motivational quotes on the walls. Everything was locked. Her file cabinets, her desk drawers, even her laptop required a password. But I'd raised this girl. I knew her habits, her patterns. Her password was Emma's birthday followed by Marcus's initials. It always was. What I found on her computer made my hands shake so badly I could barely use the mouse. Folders full of research. Articles about childhood psychological disorders, saved pages about medications and their effects on developing brains, bookmarked forums where parents discussed difficult children. But it wasn't concern I was seeing. It was calculation. One document made me physically ill. It was titled Emma's Progress and it was a detailed log of Emma's behavior, her responses to different dosages, notes about which medications made her more compliant, more withdrawn, more manageable. My daughter was treating her child like a laboratory experiment. But the most disturbing thing was a folder labeled Insurance Documentation. Cassandra had been building a case for years, documenting Emma's supposed anxiety disorders, her behavioral issues, her need for intensive medication management. She was creating a paper trail that would justify anything she decided to do. I printed everything I could and hid the papers in my bedroom, between the pages of my old recipe books. Then I started watching Emma more carefully, really watching, not just grandmotherly concern but forensic observation. The bruises were subtle. Always in places that would be covered by clothing. Never on her face or arms where teachers might notice. When I asked about them, Emma would have ready explanations. She fell at school, she bumped into her bedroom door, she was clumsy. The explanations were too smooth, too practiced. Emma had learned to lie to protect someone who was hurting her. But it wasn't just physical. The psychological manipulation was even more insidious. Cassandra had convinced Emma that her natural childhood emotions were dangerous, that her curiosity was inappropriate, that her need for affection was selfish. She turned my granddaughter into a ghost of herself. I started keeping my own log, documenting the difference in Emma's behavior when Cassandra was home versus when she was traveling. The contrast was stark and heartbreaking. Without the medication, without her mother's constant psychological pressure, Emma was a normal, bright, loving child. With them, she was a shadow. 3 weeks before that October morning that would change everything, I tried to talk to Emma directly about what was happening. We were making Halloween decorations, cutting orange and black paper into shapes, and Emma seemed more relaxed than usual. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "you know that if anyone ever hurt you, you could tell me, right? No matter who it was, no matter what they told you would happen." Emma's scissors stopped moving. She stared down at the paper bat she was cutting out, and I watched her small shoulders tense. "Mom says that sometimes people think they're helping when they're really making things worse," she said quietly. "She says that people who don't understand might try to separate families and that would be the worst thing that could happen." My heart broke. Cassandra had been preparing Emma for this possibility, had been conditioning her to protect the very person who was harming her. "But what do you think, Emma? Not what your mom says, but what you think in your own heart." She looked at me then, and I saw something I'll never forget. Hope and terror fighting each other in her brown eyes. "I think," she whispered, so quietly I could barely hear her, "I think sometimes I wish I could just disappear. Like, go somewhere where nobody knows me and start over and be a different kid who doesn't cause so many problems." That's when I knew I had to act. But I also knew I couldn't go through proper channels. Cassandra was too smart, too prepared. She had documentation showing that Emma was a troubled child who needed intensive intervention. She had a reputation in the community as a devoted single mother struggling with a difficult daughter. Who would believe a 70-year-old grandmother over a successful businesswoman? I needed proof that was undeniable. I needed to catch Cassandra in the act. So I started planning. I bought a small digital recorder and hid it in Emma's room. I installed a camera app on my phone and practiced using it discreetly. I researched domestic violence resources and child protection services, not because I planned to call them immediately, but because I needed to understand what kind of evidence would be taken seriously. And I started preparing Emma, very carefully, for the possibility that we might need to leave quickly. I made it into a game. What if we had to pack really fast and go on an adventure? I'd ask. What would you absolutely have to take with you? We made lists together, hiding them in my bedroom along with everything else. Her favorite stuffed animal, the photo of her father she kept hidden under her mattress, the journal she'd been secretly keeping. I opened a bank account that Cassandra didn't know about and started depositing my social security checks there instead of into the household account. I researched apartments in other states, places where we could disappear if we needed to. Because by then, I knew we would need to. The signs were escalating. Cassandra's business trips were becoming more frequent, but Emma's anxiety was increasing instead of decreasing when her mother was away. She'd started having nightmares that she couldn't or wouldn't describe. She'd begun hoarding food in her room, hiding granola bars and crackers like she was afraid she might not get another meal. And then there were the phone calls. Late at night, when Cassandra thought Emma and I were asleep, I'd hear her on the phone in her office. The conversations were always brief, always hushed, but I caught fragments. Talk about managing the situation and accelerating the timeline and permanent solutions. One night, about a week before that October morning, I heard something that made my blood freeze. "The grandmother is becoming a problem," Cassandra was saying. "She's getting too attached, asking too many questions. I need to handle this before she figures out what's really happening." I realized then that I wasn't just trying to save Emma. I was trying to save both of us. Because whatever Cassandra was planning, whatever this permanent solution was, It involved eliminating anyone who might interfere with her plans, including me. That night, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible 3 years earlier when I was just a grieving widow looking for a place to belong. I was going to steal my granddaughter and run. I didn't know where we'd go or how we'd survive. I didn't know if Emma would understand or forgive me for turning her life upside down. I didn't know if I had the strength at 72 to start over in a new place with a traumatized child. But I knew that staying meant watching Emma disappear piece by piece until there was nothing left of the bright, curious little girl she was supposed to be. And I knew that Cassandra's permanent solution might mean I wouldn't be around to protect Emma much longer. So I started planning our escape in earnest. I just didn't know that Emma was planning her own. And I didn't know that on a Tuesday morning in October, everything would come to a head in a way that would change both of our lives forever. I didn't know that my granddaughter, this little girl I was trying so desperately to save, was about to save me right back. The morning of October 15th started like any other Tuesday, except for the energy in the house. Cassandra was leaving for what she called the most important business trip of her career. A week in Chicago, meeting with potential investors who could take her marketing firm to the next level. She'd been preparing for this trip for months, taking calls at all hours, working late into the night, making arrangements that seemed excessive for a simple business presentation. But that was Cassandra. She never did anything halfway. I was in the kitchen making coffee when she came downstairs at 5:30 a.m., pulling her sleek black suitcase behind her. She was dressed in what I'd come to think of as her power uniform. Sharp blazer, perfect makeup, every hair in place. She looked like success incarnate. "Emma's still asleep," she said, checking her phone. "Don't wake her before 7. She needs her rest." "Of course," I said, watching her face carefully. There was something different about her expression that morning. Not excitement about the business opportunity, but something else. Something that made my grandmother instincts ping with alarm. "I've left detailed instructions on the counter," she continued, gesturing to a typed sheet of paper. "Emma's medication schedule, her doctor's contact information, emergency numbers. Everything you need." I nodded, pouring her a travel mug of coffee the way she liked it. Black, strong, slightly bitter. Like her, I thought, and then immediately felt guilty for the comparison. "This could change everything for us," Cassandra said, accepting the coffee. "If this deal goes through, Emma and I will never have to worry about money again. We can get her into the best schools, the best programs for her condition." Her condition. As if Emma's supposed anxiety was a terminal illness instead of the result of systematic psychological abuse. "How long will you be gone exactly?" I asked, though I already knew. 7 days. Long enough for Emma to start feeling safe again, long enough for me to gather the last pieces of evidence I needed, long enough for us to disappear if that's what it came to. A week, possibly a bit longer if the negotiations get complex. "You'll be fine, won't you? You and Emma have such a special relationship." There was something in her tone when she said that. Something that made me wonder if she knew more about my suspicions than she was letting on. The taxi honked outside. "That's my ride," Cassandra said, kissing my cheek in a gesture that felt more performative than affectionate. "Take good care of Emma. Make sure she doesn't get too worked up while I'm gone. You know how she can be when her routine is disrupted." I walked her to the door, watching as the taxi driver loaded her suitcase into the trunk. As she slid into the back seat, Cassandra rolled down the window. "Oh, and Mom," she called out. "I've asked Mrs. Patterson next door to check on you both. Just to make sure everything's going smoothly. She'll be stopping by every few days." Mrs. Patterson, the neighborhood busybody who'd always been inexplicably charmed by Cassandra. Who'd be watching us, reporting back on our activities while Cassandra was away. The taxi pulled away, and I stood in the doorway watching until it disappeared around the corner. Then I went back inside and looked at the detailed instructions Cassandra had left. Emma's medication schedule was more complex than usual. Extra doses of something called lorazepam, which I recognized from my research as an anti-anxiety medication that could be dangerous in high doses. Notes about keeping Emma calm and quiet, avoiding overstimulation, maintaining her routine exactly. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket, then went upstairs to check on Emma. She was awake, lying in bed staring at the ceiling. When she heard me come in, she turned her head, and I saw something in her expression that surprised me. Not the usual morning grogginess or reluctant acceptance of another day. Something sharper. More alert. "Is she gone?" Emma asked quietly. The question struck me as odd. Not did Mom leave for her trip, but is she gone? As if Emma had been waiting for this moment. Yes, sweetheart. She left for Chicago. It's just you and me for the week. Emma sat up in bed, and I saw her shoulders relax in a way I hadn't seen in months. Grandma, she said, can we talk? I mean really talk. My heart started beating faster. Of course, honey. About what? About the pills. About why I feel different when you give them to me versus when Mom does. About why I have bruises I don't remember getting. About why Mom asks me questions about what we do together when she's not here. The words came out in a rush, like water through a broken dam. Emma had been observing, analyzing, putting pieces together just like I had. This bright, brave little girl had been conducting her own investigation into her mother's behavior. I sat down on the edge of her bed, my hands trembling slightly. What have you noticed, Emma? The pills Mom gives me are different from the ones you give me. Different color, different size. When you give me medicine, I feel more awake. When Mom gives it to me, I feel fuzzy and tired and like I'm watching everything happen from far away. My heart broke. Emma had been aware of being drugged, but she was 10 years old and had no framework for understanding what was being done to her. What else? I asked gently. Mom takes pictures of me when she thinks I'm asleep. She writes things down in a notebook after she talks to me. She asks me questions that feel like tests, like she's trying to get me to say certain things. Emma paused, picking at her bedsheet. And sometimes she hurts me, but then she acts really sorry and says it was an accident and that it's our secret because people wouldn't understand how hard it is to raise a kid with problems like mine. The clinical way Emma described her abuse made me want to cry and scream at the same time. Cassandra had convinced her own daughter that the abuse was justified, that Emma deserved it because she was broken somehow. Emma, honey, listen to me very carefully. You don't have problems. You're not broken. You're a normal, healthy, wonderful little girl, and nothing that's been happening to you is your fault. Emma looked at me with those wise eyes that had seen too much. I know, she said simply. I figured that out a few weeks ago when I started feeling better on the days when you forgot to give me the pills. That's when I knew something was really wrong. My granddaughter had been playing her own waiting game, gathering her own evidence, preparing for her own moment of action. What do you want to do? I asked her. I want to leave, Emma said without hesitation. I want to go somewhere safe where Mom can't find us and where I don't have to pretend to be sick anymore. That would mean leaving everything behind. Your school, your friends, your room, all your things. I don't care, Emma said fiercely. I don't want to be here when she comes back. Something's different this time, Grandma. She's been planning something big, and I don't think it's just about business. What do you mean? Emma was quiet for a moment, then got up and went to her closet. She moved some clothes aside and pulled out a small notebook from a hiding place behind her shoes. I've been keeping track, she said, showing me pages covered in her careful 10-year-old handwriting. Mom's been giving me more medicine lately, stronger medicine. And she's been asking me weird questions about whether I ever think about dying, whether I ever wish I could just go to sleep forever. The bottom dropped out of my world. She's been asking you about dying. And she keeps talking about how expensive it is to take care of kids with mental health problems, how some families just can't handle it anymore. She shows me news stories about parents who had to make difficult decisions about sick children. I felt physically ill. The permanent solution Cassandra had been discussing on her phone calls wasn't just about getting rid of me. She was preparing to eliminate Emma too, probably making it look like a tragic case of a mentally ill child who couldn't be saved. Emma, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, how long have you known about this? I started figuring it out a month ago. That's when I started planning too. Planning what? Emma smiled, and for the first time in years, it was the smile of a child who felt hope instead of fear. Planning how we were going to escape. That's when I realized that while I'd been trying to save Emma, she'd been working on saving both of us. This 10-year-old girl had been conducting reconnaissance, gathering intelligence, and formulating an escape plan. We were about to become partners in the most important mission of our lives. Emma's notebook contained evidence that made my own discoveries look amateur in comparison. She'd been systematically documenting everything for months. Times when Cassandra gave her different medications, conversations about Emma's deteriorating condition, visits from men in suits who Emma had been told were doctors but who never examined her. They weren't doctors, Emma explained, showing me sketches she'd made of their faces. Real doctors ask kids questions and check their height and weight. These men just talked to Mom about me like I wasn't there. They asked about my prognosis and whether I was responding to treatment. My hands shook as I flipped through page after page of a child's methodical documentation of her own abuse. Emma had even recorded snippets of conversations she'd overheard, including one that made my blood run cold. Mom was on the phone last week, Emma read from her notes. She said the insurance will cover everything if we can prove she's beyond help and it needs to look natural, like her condition just got worse and after the grandmother's accident, it'll just be tragic circumstances beyond anyone's control. The grandmother's accident. Cassandra wasn't just planning to harm Emma. She was planning to kill me first, make it look accidental, and then claim that losing me had pushed Emma over the edge psychologically. Emma, why didn't you tell me about this sooner? My granddaughter looked at me with heartbreaking maturity. Because I needed to be sure you'd believe me. And I needed to have a plan for what we'd do after. What kind of plan? Emma got up and went to her dresser, pulling out what looked like a child's art project. But when she unfolded it, I saw it was actually a carefully hand-drawn map. I've been researching online at school, she explained. Libraries in different states, places that help kids who are running away from bad situations, bus routes, train schedules. I used the computers during lunch when teachers thought I was just playing games. The map showed a route from Richmond to a small town in Oregon, with stops marked at women's shelters, community centers, and libraries. Emma had even researched which states had the strongest child protection laws. Why Oregon? I asked. Because it's far away, and because I read that they have programs there for kids who've been hurt by their families. And because, she paused, looking almost embarrassed, because I found Dad's brother on the internet. Uncle David. He lives in Portland, and he's been looking for me. This was news to me. Emma, what do you mean he's been looking for you? Mom told me Dad didn't have any family, but I found Uncle David on social media. He's been posting pictures of Dad and me when I was little, asking people to share them because he wants to find his brother's daughter. Mom lied about that too. The scope of Cassandra's deception was staggering. She'd isolated Emma from her father's family, probably to maintain complete control over her narrative. I sent Uncle David a message from a fake account at school, Emma continued. I told him where I was and that I was okay but that I might need help someday. He wrote back and said he's been trying to find me since Dad died, that he has lawyers and everything. My granddaughter had been building her own support network, creating her own safety net, while I'd been stumbling around trying to figure out what was wrong. Emma, this is incredible. But also dangerous. If your mom found out. She won't, Emma said confidently. Because we're leaving today. Today? But her plane just took off. We have time to plan better, too. No, Grandma, we don't. Emma's expression became deadly serious. Mom's plane didn't go to Chicago. The words didn't make sense at first. What do you mean? I mean I watched her get in that taxi, and then I snuck out the back door and followed them. They didn't go to the airport, Grandma. They went to that extended stay hotel on Broad Street, the one where people live when they're between apartments. My mouth went dry. Are you sure? I'm sure. And I saw her take a suitcase into room 237, and then I saw her come back out wearing different clothes. Jeans and a baseball cap instead of her business suit. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Cassandra hadn't left for Chicago. She was still in Richmond, still watching us, still planning whatever she had in mind for Emma and me. Emma, we need to call someone. The police, child services, someone. No, Emma said firmly. They won't believe us. Mom's too smart, and she's been planning this for too long. By the time anyone investigated, it would be too late. She was right, and I knew it. Cassandra had built the perfect cover story. Successful businesswoman with a mentally ill child and an aging mother. If something happened to Emma and me while she was supposedly out of town on business, who would question it? So what do we do? Emma pulled out a small backpack that I realized she'd already packed with essentials. We leave now, while she thinks we don't know she's still here. We go to the bus station and get on the first Greyhound heading west. Emma, I can't ask you to do this. To leave everything behind, too. Grandma, she interrupted, taking my hands in her small ones, she's going to hurt us. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but soon. I heard her practicing on the phone last night, talking to someone about how she found us both dead when she got home from her trip. She was rehearsing, Grandma, like it was lines in a play. The matter-of-fact way Emma delivered this information was almost more chilling than the content itself. My granddaughter had accepted that her mother was planning to murder us both, and she'd moved into survival mode. What about money? Clothes? We can't just. I've thought of everything, Emma said, and proceeded to show me that she had. She'd been slowly moving clothes to her school locker over the past few weeks. She'd saved every dollar from her allowance and had even taken some cash from Cassandra's purse in small amounts that wouldn't be noticed. She'd researched bus fares and had enough to get us to Portland. And Uncle David said that if I ever needed help, I should call him day or night. I have his number memorized. I stared at this 10-year-old girl who'd been planning our salvation while I'd been frozen with indecision and fear. Emma had inherited her mother's intelligence and planning abilities, but she was using them to protect instead of harm. Are you sure about this? I asked. Once we leave, we can't come back. This will change everything. Emma looked at me with eyes that had seen too much but still held hope. Grandma, everything already changed. We just haven't admitted it yet. She was right. The life I'd thought we were living here had been an illusion. Emma had never been safe in this house, and now neither was I. Okay, I said, feeling like I was jumping off a cliff. What do we do first? Emma smiled, and it was pure relief mixed with determination. First, we pack only what we absolutely need. Then we sneak out the back door and walk to the bus station. But we have to be really careful, because she might be watching the house. As if on cue, I heard a car door slam outside. Emma and I froze, looking at each other with wide eyes. Stay here, I whispered, creeping to the window. Mrs. Patterson was walking up our front sidewalk, carrying what looked like a casserole dish. But she was checking her phone constantly, and she kept glancing at the windows like she was looking for signs of activity inside. It's Mrs. Patterson, I told Emma. But something's off about the way she's acting. Emma joined me at the window, peering through the curtains. She's not here to be neighborly, Emma said grimly. Mom probably asked her to check on us, to make sure we're still here. The doorbell rang, followed by Mrs. Patterson's cheerful voice calling out, "Hello. Just bringing over some dinner for you and Emma." Emma and I looked at each other. If we didn't answer, Mrs. Patterson would know something was wrong. But if we did answer, we'd be trapped in a conversation that would delay our escape. What do we do? I whispered. Emma's expression hardened with a determination that reminded me painfully of her mother. We go out the back door right now, she said. While she's at the front door. We grab our bags and we run. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. Emma. Mrs. Wells. Mrs. Patterson called out. I know you're in there. That's when I knew Emma was right. Mrs. Patterson wasn't just being neighborly. She was checking up on us, probably with instructions to report back to Cassandra immediately. Emma grabbed her backpack and I quickly threw some essentials into my purse. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Mrs. Patterson would hear it through the front door. We crept down the back stairs, Emma leading the way with the confidence of a child who'd clearly planned this escape route multiple times. As we reached the kitchen, I could hear Mrs. Patterson walking around to the side of the house, probably trying to peer through windows. Now, Emma whispered. We slipped out the back door and into the yard, keeping low as we made our way to the fence line. Emma had thought of everything. She'd even identified the loose board in the fence that we could slip through to access the alley behind the house. As we emerged onto the street 3 blocks away, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Cassandra. How are things going? Mrs. P says no one answered the door. Is everything okay? My blood ran cold. Cassandra was monitoring us in real time, even while pretending to be on a plane to Chicago. Don't answer, Emma said, seeing my expression. Let her think we're just out running errands or something. We need as much time as possible before she realizes we're really gone. We walked quickly toward downtown Richmond, Emma navigating with the confidence of someone who'd studied every street between our house and the bus station. Every few blocks, she'd glance behind us or duck into a store doorway, checking to make sure we weren't being followed. Emma, I said as we waited at a crosswalk, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. She nodded. Are you scared? Emma considered the question seriously before answering. I'm terrified, she said. But I'm more scared of what happens if we stay than what happens if we go. That's when it hit me fully. This wasn't just about escaping an abusive situation. This was about two people choosing to disappear from their old lives completely, to become different people in a different place, because the alternative was death. We reached the Greyhound station just as the 2:30 p.m. bus to Nashville was boarding. From Nashville, Emma had determined, we could catch a connection to Denver, and from Denver to Portland. 2 tickets to Nashville, I told the clerk, my voice surprisingly steady. As we settled into our seats near the back of the bus, Emma pulled out a small flip phone I'd never seen before. Where did you get that? I bought it with babysitting money 3 months ago, she said. Just in case we needed to communicate without Mom tracking us. This child had been planning our escape with the thoroughness of a military operation while I'd been paralyzed by doubt and fear. As the bus pulled out of Richmond, Emma leaned against my shoulder and closed her eyes for the first time in what seemed like years. Grandma, she said sleepily, do you think we'll ever be able to come back? I looked out the window at the city where I'd lived my entire life disappearing behind us. I don't know, sweetheart, but I think sometimes running away is the bravest thing you can do. Emma was quiet for a moment. Good, she said. Because I never wanted to be brave before, but now I do. As our bus carried us toward an uncertain future, I realized that my 10-year-old granddaughter had just orchestrated the most successful escape plan I'd ever heard of. But I also realized that this was just the beginning. Because somewhere back in Richmond, Cassandra was about to discover that her carefully laid plans had just been destroyed by the two people she'd underestimated most. And when she figured out what we'd done, the real danger would begin. We'd been on the road for 6 hours when Emma's small hand found mine and squeezed tight. Not the gentle squeeze of affection, but the desperate grip of pure terror. Grandma, she whispered, so quietly I could barely hear her over the rumble of the bus engine. We need to go. Now. I looked at her, confused. We were already going. We were on a Greyhound bus somewhere outside Knoxville, Tennessee, putting miles between us and Richmond with every passing minute. What are you talking about, sweetheart? Emma was staring at her phone, her face pale in the dim light of the bus. She'd been checking it periodically since we left, monitoring a Facebook account she'd created to keep track of Cassandra's movements. She's gone, Emma said, her voice hollow. We have to leave. Who's gone? Emma, you're not making sense. Mom, Emma said, turning the phone screen toward me. Look. On the screen was a post from Cassandra's business partner, timestamped 20 minutes ago. Safe travels to Cassie. So proud of how hard she's worked for this Chicago opportunity. Her flight just took off. Here's to making dreams come true. The photo showed Cassandra at what was clearly Richmond International Airport, wearing the same business suit she'd left the house in that morning, pulling her black suitcase, waving at the camera with a bright smile. My blood turned to ice. Emma, that's impossible. You saw her at the hotel, you said. That was this morning, Emma said urgently. But look at the timestamp on this post. Her flight really did just take off. Which means she was in Richmond all day, watching us, waiting for something. And now she's actually gone to Chicago. But why would she? Emma grabbed my arm with both hands, her eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen before. Because she's not going to Chicago for business, Grandma. She's going there to establish an alibi. She's going to be in meetings with witnesses when something happens to us back home. The pieces clicked together in my mind with terrifying clarity. Cassandra had spent the day in Richmond making sure Emma and I were following our normal routine. Mrs. Patterson's visit wasn't just surveillance, it was confirmation that we were still in the house, still following the schedule Cassandra had left for us. And now that Cassandra had verification that everything was proceeding according to plan, she'd actually flown to Chicago to be far away and clearly innocent when whatever she'd set in motion back home came to pass. Emma, what do you think she's planning? Emma was scrolling frantically through her phone, checking local news sites and social media. I don't know exactly, but it'll look like an accident. Maybe a gas leak, or a break-in gone wrong, or... She paused, her face going even paler. Or maybe it'll look like I finally had the breakdown she's been documenting for years. Like I hurt you and then hurt myself because I couldn't cope with my mental illness. The clinical precision with which Emma analyzed her mother's murder plot was heartbreaking and terrifying. But we're not there, I said. Whatever she has planned, we're not there for it to happen to. That's why we have to keep running, Emma said urgently. Because when she finds out we're gone, when whatever she's planned doesn't work, she'll know we figured her out. She'll know we have evidence. She'll do whatever it takes to find us. Emma was right. Our escape had bought us time, but it had also painted targets on our backs. Cassandra wouldn't just be dealing with a failed murder plot, she'd be dealing with potential witnesses who could destroy her entire carefully constructed life. What do we do? Emma looked out the bus window at the Tennessee countryside rolling past in the darkness. We disappear completely. New names, new identities, new everything. Uncle David can help us, but first we have to make sure Mom can never find us. My granddaughter had shifted into full survival mode, and I realized that while I'd been thinking of this as a temporary escape, Emma understood that we were never going home again. Emma, I said carefully, you understand what this means, don't you? We'll never see anyone from our old life again. Your friends at school, our neighbors, even the good memories. There weren't any good memories, Emma said flatly. Not real ones. Everything good in that house was just me pretending things were normal so Mom wouldn't get angry. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke my heart. But you'll miss things. Your room, your toys. Mom was going to kill us, Grandma, Emma said, turning to look at me directly. She was going to murder us and make everyone think it was tragic but inevitable. I don't want anything from that life. I want to be Emma who lives in Oregon with her grandma and her uncle, not Emma who died in Virginia because her mom was a monster. The bus pulled into the Knoxville station for a scheduled stop, and Emma immediately began scanning the other passengers, the people waiting on the platform, anyone who might be watching us. We need to switch buses, she said. Take a different route. Mom's smart, she'll figure out we were running to Oregon, and she'll be watching the direct routes. How do you know all this? Emma looked at me with those two old eyes. Because I've been studying her for months, learning how she thinks, how she plans. I know her better than anyone, and I know she won't stop until she finds us or until she's sure we're dead. We got off the bus in Knoxville and bought tickets on a different line that would take us north through Kentucky and Illinois before heading west. It would add days to our journey, but Emma was right, it would be harder to track. As we waited for our new bus, Emma made a call on her flip phone. Uncle David. It's Emma. We had to leave. I know it's earlier than we planned, but something happened. We're on our way to you, but we're taking a long route. Can you help us disappear when we get there? I couldn't hear his responses, but I could see Emma's face relaxing slightly as she talked to him. He's already talked to lawyers, she told me after hanging up. He's been preparing for this possibility since I first contacted him. He can help us get new identities, get me enrolled in school under a different name, everything. Emma, how long have you been planning this? Since I was 8, she said simply. Since the first time Mom hurt me and then cried and said it was because she loved me so much. That's when I knew something was really wrong, and I started thinking about what I'd do if I ever got the chance to leave. My granddaughter had been planning her escape for 2 years. 2 years of a child living with the knowledge that her mother was dangerous, preparing for the day she might have to run for her life. I'm sorry, I said, tears filling my eyes. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner, didn't act sooner. You did see it, Emma said gently. You stopped giving me the pills. You started watching her. You were getting ready to save me, but I got ready to save both of us. She leaned against me as we waited for our bus. Besides, it had to be this way. If you tried to save me without me knowing what was happening, I would have been too scared to leave. I needed to understand that staying was more dangerous than running. Our new bus arrived, and as we settled into seats near the back again, Emma pulled out a small notebook and began writing. What's that? I'm documenting everything that happened today, she said. The timeline, the evidence that Mom was lying about her trip, the proof that she was planning to hurt us. Uncle David says we'll need as much documentation as possible if we ever want to make sure she can't come after us legally. Even in the middle of running for our lives, Emma was thinking strategically, building a case, protecting our future. Emma, I said, are you sure you're only 10 years old? She looked up from her notebook and smiled, the first genuinely happy smile I'd seen from her in months. I'm 10 years old, but I've had to learn to think like an adult to survive. Maybe now I can learn to be a kid again. As our bus pulled out of Knoxville, heading north into the darkness, I realized that the thumbnail moment, that terrifying instant when Emma grabbed my hand and said we had to leave, had been the pivot point of our entire story. That was the moment when we stopped being victims and became survivors. That was the moment when Emma stopped being a trapped child and became the architect of our freedom. That was the moment when I stopped being a helpless grandmother watching her family fall apart and became a partner in the most important mission of my life. Everything that came before that moment had been leading us toward it. Everything that came after would be shaped by the choice we made in that instant to trust each other completely and run toward an uncertain but hopeful future. But I also knew that while we'd won the first battle, the war was far from over. Because somewhere in Chicago, Cassandra was about to discover that her perfect plan had gone horribly wrong. And when she did, she'd become more dangerous than ever. We'd been traveling for 3 days, zigzagging across the country on different bus lines, sleeping in stations and truck stops, when Emma's phone started buzzing incessantly. She'd been checking it periodically, but this was different. Urgent. Frantic. "It's starting," she said, showing me the screen. Cassandra had been calling and texting non-stop for the past hour. The messages began worried and escalated quickly to panicked to angry to threatening. "Where are you? Mrs. P says you haven't been home in days. Emma, if this is some kind of game, it's not funny. I'm cutting my trip short and coming home right now. You have no idea what you've done. When I find you, there will be consequences." But it was the last message that made my blood run cold. "I know you think you're protecting her, but Emma is sick. She needs help. If you don't bring her home immediately, I'll have to call the authorities and report that you've kidnapped a mentally ill child." "She's going to use the system against us," Emma said grimly. "She's going to claim that you kidnapped me, that I'm not capable of making rational decisions because of my mental illness." "But we have evidence." "Evidence that a 10-year-old gathered and a grandmother interpreted," Emma interrupted. "Against the word of a successful businesswoman with years of medical documentation showing that her daughter is unstable." Emma was right. In the eyes of the law, I was a 72-year-old woman who'd taken a child across state lines without permission. The fact that I was protecting her from abuse would be irrelevant if Cassandra could convince authorities that Emma's claims were the result of mental illness. "What do we do?" Emma was already dialing her uncle's number. "Uncle David. She knows." "Yes, she's already making threats." "How long before you can get the legal protection in place?" "Okay, we'll keep moving until then." She hung up and looked at me with grim determination. "He says it'll take at least a week to get emergency custody paperwork filed and approved. Until then, we're technically fugitives." "Emma, maybe we should." "No," she said firmly. "We're not going back. Whatever happens, we're not going back." But even as she said it, I could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. The confidence she'd shown during our escape was wavering as the reality of our situation set in. We were on a bus somewhere in Missouri, and Emma was constantly checking behind us, scanning every new passenger who boarded, jumping at every unexpected sound. The stress was taking its toll on both of us. That afternoon, as we waited for a connection in St. Louis, Emma disappeared for 20 minutes. I found her in the station bathroom, throwing up from anxiety. "Hey," I said, rubbing her back as she retched into the toilet. "It's going to be okay." "What if she's right?" Emma said weakly. "What if I am crazy and this is all in my head and I'm making you run away with me for no reason?" The doubt in her voice broke my heart. Even after everything she'd uncovered, everything she'd planned, Cassandra's psychological manipulation was still working. "Emma, look at me." She raised her head, and I saw the scared little girl she still was underneath all her adult-level planning and survival instincts. "You are not crazy. You are not sick. You are a brave, intelligent child who saved both of our lives. Don't let her voice in your head convince you otherwise." Emma nodded, but I could see the uncertainty still lingering. "Besides," I added, "crazy people don't plan escapes this good. You've thought of everything." That got a small smile from her. But our relief was short-lived. As we boarded our next bus, Emma grabbed my arm. "Don't look back," she whispered, "but there's a man who's been following us. Blue jacket, baseball cap. He was at the Knoxville station, and he was at our last stop, and now he's here." My blood ran cold. "Are you sure?" "I've been watching him for 2 days. He always stays far enough away that it doesn't seem obvious, but he gets on whatever bus we get on." Cassandra had found us. Somehow, despite all our precautions, all our route changes, She tracked us down and sent someone after us. What do we do? Emma was already thinking ahead. We get off at the next stop and disappear into the crowd. But first, we need to know who he is and how he found us. Emma, that's too dangerous. It's more dangerous not to know, she said. If he's tracking us somehow, changing buses won't help. We need to figure out how they're following us. At the next station, a truck stop outside Kansas City, Emma put her plan into action. While I created a distraction by asking the bus driver loud questions about schedules, Emma slipped off the bus and circled around to get a closer look at our pursuer. She was back within 5 minutes, her face pale. It's not just some private investigator, she said. It's Detective Morrison from Richmond PD. I recognized him from when he came to the school to do a safety presentation. The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. Cassandra hadn't just hired someone to find us. She'd convinced the police that we were criminals. She must have reported me for kidnapping, I said. And she probably told them I'm having a psychotic break, that I might hurt myself or others if I'm not brought back for treatment. Emma was right. From law enforcement's perspective, this wasn't about family drama or abuse allegations. This was about a mentally ill child who'd been taken by an elderly relative who might not be thinking clearly. We need to call Uncle David again, Emma said. But when she tried, the call went straight to voicemail. Uncle David, it's Emma. The police are following us. We're in Kansas City, but we're about to run again. Please call back as soon as you get this. We ditched the bus station and made our way into the city, using what little cash we had left to catch a cab to the opposite side of town. Emma navigated like she'd been planning escape routes her whole life, which, I was beginning to realize, she had been. We need to find somewhere to hide while we figure out our next move, she said. Emma, maybe we should just turn ourselves in. If we explain what really happened. They won't believe us, Emma said. Not over Mom. She's had years to build her case that I'm mentally ill. She has medical records, school reports, documentation from multiple doctors. All I have is a notebook full of observations that could be dismissed as the fantasies of a disturbed child. She was right, and the injustice of it made me furious. Cassandra had been so thorough, so calculating, that even her victim's escape could be twisted to support her narrative. We ended up at a 24-hour laundromat, sitting among the washers and dryers, trying to figure out our next move. Emma was exhausted, the adrenaline finally wearing off, and I could see her starting to shut down emotionally. I'm sorry, Grandma, she said quietly. I thought I had everything planned out, but I didn't think about her using the police. Emma, you planned an amazing escape. You saved our lives. The fact that your mother is even more devious than we realized isn't your fault. But I could see that my words weren't reaching her. The stress and fear were overwhelming her 10-year-old coping mechanisms, and she was starting to retreat into herself the way she had back home. That's when my phone rang. It was Uncle David. Thank God, he said when I answered. I've been trying to reach you. Where are you exactly? Kansas City. There's a police detective following us. Cassandra convinced them that I kidnapped Emma. I know. I've been working with lawyers all day. The good news is that I have temporary custody paperwork being filed in Oregon. The bad news is that it won't be valid until you get here and we can present Emma's evidence to a judge. What do we do about the detective? You run, he said simply. I'm driving to meet you. If you can make it to Denver, I can pick you up there and we can drive back to Oregon together. Once we're in Oregon, I have legal standing to protect Emma. How do we get to Denver without being caught? There was a pause. Emma needs to make that decision, he said. Put her on the phone. I handed the phone to Emma, and I watched her face transform as she talked to her uncle. For the first time since we'd started running, she looked like she was talking to someone who completely believed in her, who saw her as capable rather than fragile. Okay, she said finally. We'll see you in Denver. She hung up and looked at me with renewed determination. Uncle David has a plan. But it's risky, and it means we'll have to split up temporarily. Absolutely not. Grandma, listen. Detective Morrison is following us because he thinks we're together. But if we separate, if you create a trail going one direction while I go another, we can confuse them long enough for both of us to make it to Denver. The idea of separating from Emma, even temporarily, terrified me. What if something happens to you? Emma smiled, and I saw a flash of the confident child she was becoming. Then I'll handle it. I've been taking care of myself for years, Grandma. Now I just have to do it openly instead of secretly. Separating from Emma felt like cutting out a piece of my heart, but she was right about the strategy. Detective Morrison had been tracking two people traveling together, an elderly woman and a child. If we split up, we could divide his attention and create confusion about our actual destination. Emma's plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would leave the laundromat together but separate at the bus station. I would buy a ticket to Phoenix and make sure Detective Morrison saw me boarding alone, looking distraught and confused, playing into the narrative that I was an elderly woman who'd impulsively taken her granddaughter and was now having second thoughts. Meanwhile, Emma would slip out the back of the station and make her way to the train depot across town. She'd take Amtrak to Denver, where Uncle David would be waiting. But what if he doesn't follow me? I asked. What if he realizes you're the real target and goes after you instead? Then I'll handle it, Emma said with a confidence that both amazed and terrified me. I've been planning for that possibility too. She showed me a fake ID she'd somehow acquired, nothing sophisticated, just a school ID from a different district with her photo and a different name. Emma Rodriguez, age 12. Where did you get this? There are kids at school who know how to make fake IDs for buying movie tickets and stuff. I commissioned this one months ago, just in case. My granddaughter had been preparing for every contingency while I'd been stumbling around trying to figure out what was happening. Emma, I don't like this. You're 10 years old. I'm 10 years old and I've been successfully hiding evidence of abuse and planning escape routes for 2 years, she interrupted. I can handle 18 hours on a train to Denver. She was right, but that didn't make it easier. We synchronized our watches and made our plan. If either of us didn't make it to Denver, we would call Uncle David with a code word that would alert him to contact the FBI instead of local police. Emma had researched which federal agencies handled interstate child abduction cases, and she'd prepared Uncle David with specific information about corruption in the Richmond PD that Detective Morrison might be part of. How do you know about police corruption? Because I've been researching everyone involved in my case, Emma said matter-of-factly. Detective Morrison has been involved in several questionable child custody cases over the past few years. Cases where children were returned to abusive parents who had connections or money. The depth of Emma's investigation was staggering. While I'd been focused on documenting Cassandra's abuse, Emma had been mapping the entire system that enabled it. You really have thought of everything. I had to, she said simply. My life depended on it. We made our way to the bus station, and I could see Detective Morrison immediately. He was trying to blend in, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee, but his eyes were constantly scanning the crowd. Remember, Emma whispered, you're a confused elderly woman who's realized she's made a terrible mistake. You're scared and you want to go home, but you can't because you've committed a crime. Where did you learn to act? From watching Mom lie to people for years. The casual way Emma referenced her mother's deception was heartbreaking, but there was no time to dwell on it. Emma melted into the crowd with the skill of someone who'd spent years trying to be invisible. I watched her disappear among the other travelers, and then I approached the ticket counter. I need to get to Phoenix, I said loudly enough for Detective Morrison to overhear. Today. It's an emergency. The ticket agent was sympathetic and helpful, explaining schedules and connections while Detective Morrison pretended to read his newspaper just a few feet away. As I bought my ticket, I let my hands shake visibly and asked questions that suggested confusion and regret. Will there be police at the Phoenix station? I mean, if someone was looking for me, would they be waiting there? The ticket agent looked concerned and asked if I needed help, which was perfect for the performance. No, I've made some mistakes recently, and I'm trying to fix them. I could see Detective Morrison listening to every word. When my bus was called for boarding, I made sure to look around nervously, like I was checking to see if I was being followed. Detective Morrison took the bait and followed me onto the bus, taking a seat several rows behind me. As the bus pulled out of Kansas City, I allowed myself one moment of hope. Emma's plan was working. Detective Morrison was following me toward Phoenix while Emma was hopefully already on a train heading to Denver. But my relief was short-lived. 2 hours into the journey, my phone rang. It was Uncle David, and his voice was tight with controlled panic. Is Emma with you? My heart stopped. No, we split up according to the plan. She was supposed to take the train to Denver. Isn't she there yet? The train she was supposed to be on never left Kansas City. There was a mechanical problem, and all passengers were transferred to buses. But Emma wasn't on any of the buses. The world tilted around me. Emma was missing, somewhere in Kansas City, and I was on a bus to Phoenix with the one person who might have been able to help find her. I have to go back, I said. No, Uncle David said firmly. If you go back now, you'll be arrested, and then we'll have no way to help Emma legally. You have to trust that she'll find a way to contact us. But she's 10 years old and she's alone. She's 10 years old and she's the most resourceful person either of us has ever met, Uncle David interrupted. She'll figure something out. I wanted to argue, but I knew he was right. Emma had been planning for contingencies I couldn't even imagine. If anyone could handle being stranded and alone, it was her. But that didn't make the next 6 hours any easier. I sat on that bus to Phoenix, playing the role of a confused elderly woman while internally screaming with worry about Emma. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it would be her. Instead, it was updates from Uncle David about his efforts to locate her through official channels. The train station had security footage showing Emma entering but not leaving. Hotel registrations showed no one matching her description. Local hospitals and police stations had no record of a 10-year-old girl seeking help. Emma had vanished completely. It wasn't until we reached a rest stop outside Albuquerque that my phone finally rang with the call I'd been desperately waiting for. Grandma. Emma. Thank God, where are you? I'm okay, but I can't tell you where I am right now. Someone might be listening to your calls. My granddaughter was thinking about operational security even while stranded and alone. Are you safe? I'm safe. I found help, but not the kind we expected. I'll explain everything when I see you, but I need you to keep going to Phoenix. Don't change the plan. Emma, I can come back for you. No. Detective Morrison is still following you, right? I glanced back and saw him sleeping in his seat several rows behind me. Yes. Good. Keep him busy. I have a different way to get to Uncle David, but I need to know that Morrison isn't going to figure out what's really happening. How will you? Trust me, Grandma. I've got this handled. The confidence in her voice was reassuring and terrifying at the same time. Emma, I love you. I love you too. I'll see you soon. She hung up before I could ask any more questions. For the rest of the journey to Phoenix, I played my role while trying not to think about all the terrible things that could be happening to Emma. When we reached Phoenix, Detective Morrison approached me as I got off the bus. Mrs. Wells? I'm Detective Morrison with Richmond PD. I need to ask you some questions about your granddaughter. I let my face crumple with what I hoped looked like relief mixed with shame. Oh, thank goodness, I said. I've made such a terrible mistake. Emma needs help, and I thought I was protecting her, but I've only made things worse. Where is Emma now, Mrs. Wells? I don't know. She ran away from me in Kansas City. She was so angry, so confused. I tried to follow her, but I lost her in the crowd. Detective Morrison's expression darkened. Mrs. Wells, I need you to understand how serious this situation is. Emma is a vulnerable child with documented mental health issues. Every hour she's missing increases the danger she's in. I know. I thought I was helping her. But now I see that I was wrong. Her mother knows best. Cassandra knows how to take care of her. We need to find Emma immediately. Do you have any idea where she might have gone? I shook my head, trying to look helpless and ashamed. She mentioned wanting to see the ocean once. Maybe California? But I don't know how she'd get there, or where she'd go. Detective Morrison made some phone calls, presumably alerting authorities in California to watch for a 10-year-old girl traveling alone. What he didn't know was that while he was organizing a search for Emma heading west, she was actually somewhere else entirely, executing a plan I couldn't even imagine. I just had to trust that my brilliant, brave granddaughter knew what she was doing. I didn't hear from Emma for 36 hours. 36 hours of being questioned by Detective Morrison, 36 hours of playing the role of a remorseful grandmother while internally screaming with worry, 36 hours of wondering if I'd ever see my granddaughter again. During that time, Detective Morrison had me staying at a motel in Phoenix while authorities searched for Emma. He was professional but persistent, asking the same questions over and over, looking for inconsistencies in my story. Tell me again about Emma's behavior before you left Richmond, he said for the 10th time. I stuck to the script Emma and I had prepared, painting a picture of a confused elderly woman who'd misinterpreted her granddaughter's normal childhood struggles as signs of abuse. She seemed so scared all the time, I said, letting tears fill my eyes. But now I realize it wasn't fear of her mother. It was her illness. The anxiety and paranoia that Cassandra's been trying to treat. And when did you decide to take Emma away? I don't know. It wasn't really a decision. I was just so worried about her, and when Cassandra left for her business trip, Emma seemed so different. More anxious. I thought maybe a change of scenery would help. Detective Morrison nodded sympathetically, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He was experienced enough to know when someone was hiding something, but he couldn't quite figure out what. Then, on the second day, everything changed. I was sitting in the motel restaurant, picking at a sandwich I had no appetite for, when Detective Morrison's phone rang. I watched his face transform as he listened to whoever was on the other end. What do you mean she's where? He said, his voice sharp with surprise. He listened for another minute, then hung up and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Mrs. Wells, we found Emma. My heart leaped with relief and terror. Is she okay? Where is she? She's fine. She's in Washington, D.C., at the FBI field office on Pennsylvania Avenue. The words didn't make sense. The FBI? How did she? Apparently, your granddaughter walked into the federal building yesterday morning and requested to speak with agents about interstate child trafficking and corruption in local law enforcement. My mouth fell open. Emma hadn't just run when her train was cancelled. She'd gone on the offensive. She presented them with evidence of a conspiracy involving her mother and potentially corrupt officials in Richmond. The FBI is taking her allegations seriously enough that they've placed her in protective custody pending investigation. Detective Morrison was staring at me intently, watching my reaction. Mrs. Wells, did you know that Emma had been documenting what she believed to be criminal activity for over 2 years? I tried to look surprised. Criminal activity? What kind of criminal activity? According to the FBI agents I just spoke with, Emma has presented them with detailed records of systematic child abuse, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and potentially human trafficking. My blood ran cold. Human trafficking? Emma had uncovered something even worse than I'd realized. I don't understand, I said weakly. Emma claims that her mother has been drugging her and documenting false mental illness symptoms as part of a larger scheme involving multiple children. She says the business trips to Chicago weren't for her marketing firm, they were to transport children to buyers. The scope of what Emma had discovered was staggering. Cassandra wasn't just an abusive mother. She was part of a trafficking network. She also claims, Detective Morrison continued, that you weren't kidnapping her. You were helping her escape, and she was leading you to safety because she knew you were both in danger. I stared at him, trying to process what was happening. Emma requested that FBI agents review your case file and my involvement specifically. She had some very interesting questions about why I was assigned to track you down instead of following proper procedures for a missing child case. Detective Morrison's tone had shifted. He wasn't questioning me as a suspect anymore. He was questioning himself. Mrs. Wells, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. So I did. I told him about the medication, about Emma's behavior changes, about the documentation I'd found on Cassandra's computer. I told him about the threatening phone calls and the planned permanent solution. I told him about Emma's incredible investigation and escape plan. Detective Morrison listened without interruption, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. Why didn't Emma come to the police in Richmond? He asked when I finished. Because she'd researched your department and found connections to cases where children were returned to abusive situations despite evidence of danger. She didn't trust local law enforcement. Detective Morrison was quiet for a long moment. She was right not to trust us, he said finally. This case came down from higher up than usual. I was told specifically that the grandmother was unstable and the child was dangerously mentally ill, and that bringing them back quickly was essential for everyone's safety. Who told you that? My captain. Who got the information from Child Protective Services? Who got it from? He paused, checking his notes. From Dr. Richards, Emma's primary physician. My heart sank. Dr. Richards was part of it. According to Emma's evidence, Dr. Richards has been prescribing unnecessary medications to multiple children and falsifying mental health records. She believes he's a key part of the trafficking operation. Emma hadn't just uncovered her own abuse. She'd exposed an entire criminal network. What happens now? Detective Morrison closed his notepad. Now we go to Washington. The FBI wants to interview both of us, and they want to reunite you with Emma under federal protection. And Cassandra. A federal task force is being assembled. If Emma's evidence is as comprehensive as it appears to be, your daughter will be facing federal charges for conspiracy, trafficking, fraud, and attempted murder. As we prepared to leave Phoenix, I felt a mix of relief and vindication and absolute amazement at what Emma had accomplished. My 10-year-old granddaughter had done more than escape from an abusive situation. She'd brought down a criminal organization that had been exploiting children for years. But I also felt a deep sadness for the childhood Emma had lost, for the innocence that had been stripped away by the very person who should have protected her most. On the flight to Washington, Detective Morrison asked me one more question. Mrs. Wells, how did Emma know to go to the FBI? How did she know which specific crimes to report and which agents to ask for? I thought about Emma's notebook, about the months of careful documentation and research, about the depth of planning that had gone into every aspect of our escape. Because she's been preparing for this moment for 2 years, I said. Because when you're a child trapped in an impossible situation, you develop survival skills that most adults never need. And because Emma is extraordinary. She's going to need therapy, Detective Morrison said gently. Recovery from this kind of trauma takes time. I know. But Emma's stronger than anyone realizes. She always has been. What I didn't say was that I was the one who was going to need help adjusting to this new reality. Emma had been functioning as an adult for years, protecting herself and planning her own rescue. I was the one who'd been living in denial, hoping that things weren't as bad as they seemed. Emma had saved us both, but she'd also shown me that she didn't need saving in the way I'd thought she did. She needed support, and love, and the chance to finally be a child again. But she didn't need someone to rescue her. She was perfectly capable of rescuing herself. As our plane descended toward Washington, D.C., I realized that I was about to be reunited with my granddaughter, but the little girl I'd lived with in Richmond was gone forever. The person waiting for me at the FBI field office would be someone new. Someone who'd fought a war and won. Someone who'd turned the tables on her abusers so completely that they'd never be able to hurt another child. Someone who'd taught her 72-year-old grandmother that sometimes the smallest people are capable of the biggest victories. The FBI field office in Washington was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the cold, intimidating government building I'd imagined, Emma was waiting for me in a comfortable conference room with Agent Sarah Chen, a woman about Cassandra's age who treated Emma with the respect and seriousness she deserved. When Emma saw me walk in, she ran to me with the enthusiasm of a normal 10-year-old, and for a moment, I could almost pretend that none of this had happened. Grandma, you did so good with Detective Morrison. Agent Chen says he's actually helping now instead of just following orders. Emma looked healthier than I'd seen her in months. Her eyes were bright, her posture was straight, and she was talking with the animated energy of a child who was finally free to be herself. Emma, sweetheart, I was so worried about you. How did you know to come here? I researched it months ago, she said matter-of-factly. I knew that if local police were part of the problem, I'd need federal help. I memorized the address and the names of agents who specialize in child trafficking cases. Agent Chen smiled. Emma walked in here like she owned the place and asked to speak with agents about a RICO case involving interstate child trafficking. Most adults don't even know what RICO means. I looked it up, Emma said proudly. Racketeering. It's for when criminals work together in an organized way. Like Mom and Dr. Richards and the people in Chicago. The casual way Emma discussed federal criminal law was both impressive and heartbreaking. Agent Chen gestured for us to sit down. I need to brief you both on what we've learned since Emma came forward with her evidence. She opened a thick file folder and spread documents across the table. Emma's documentation has been remarkably thorough. We've corroborated most of her claims through financial records, medical files, and surveillance data. What we've uncovered is a trafficking operation that's been active for at least 5 years. She showed us photos of Cassandra meeting with people I didn't recognize, financial records showing payments from offshore accounts, and medical records for dozens of children. Your daughter wasn't just abusing Emma, Agent Chen continued. She was part of a network that identified vulnerable children, falsified mental health diagnoses to make them seem damaged and unwanted, and then sold them to buyers who specifically wanted children who wouldn't be missed or believed if they reported abuse. The scope of it was nauseating. The business trips to Chicago weren't for her marketing firm, Agent Chen said. They were to deliver children to a broker who arranged international adoptions and private placements for wealthy clients who wanted children with no legal protections. How many children? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. We've identified at least 37 children over the past 5 years. Emma would have been number 38. I felt physically sick. My daughter had been planning to sell her own child. What happened to the other children? We're working with international partners to locate them. Some have been recovered already. Others. Agent Chen's expression was grim. Others may never be found. Emma listened to all of this with the composure of someone much older, taking notes in her ever-present notebook. What about Dr. Richards? She asked. Dr. Richards has been arrested. He's already agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's provided us with names of other medical professionals involved in the network, as well as details about how they falsified diagnoses and prescribed unnecessary medications. And Detective Morrison. Detective Morrison wasn't part of the conspiracy, Agent Chen said. He was manipulated by his superiors, who were receiving payments to ensure that certain cases were handled in specific ways. He's agreed to testify about the pressure he received to treat your disappearance as a kidnapping rather than a rescue. Emma nodded, satisfied that her research had been accurate. What about Mom? She asked quietly. Agent Chen's expression softened. Emma, your mother was arrested this morning in Chicago. She's being charged with conspiracy, human trafficking, child abuse, attempted murder, and racketeering. She'll likely spend the rest of her life in federal prison. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Good, she said finally. She can't hurt any more kids now. The matter-of-fact way Emma accepted her mother's fate broke my heart. No child should have to feel relief about their parent being arrested, but Emma had moved beyond hoping for Cassandra's redemption. She understood that some people are too dangerous to be free. Agent Chen turned to me. Mrs. Wells, there's something else you need to know. Cassandra had plans for you as well. She showed me documents that made my blood run cold. Insurance policies, medical records showing early-stage dementia that I'd never been diagnosed with, and correspondence about the need to place me in specialized care. She was building a case to have you declared mentally incompetent and institutionalized. The life insurance payout from your accidental death would have funded her operation for years. I stared at the documents, seeing my own death planned out in clinical detail. How long had she been planning this? Based on these records, since before you moved in with her. Your husband's death created an opportunity for her to access your assets while eliminating potential witnesses to Emma's abuse. Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She invited you to live with us because she was planning to kill you all along, Emma said gently. But you ended up saving me instead. The next few hours were spent going through Emma's evidence piece by piece, with federal agents marveling at the thoroughness of her investigation. Emma, Agent Chen said, have you ever considered a career in law enforcement? Because this is some of the best investigative work I've ever seen. Emma smiled, but then her expression grew serious. I want to help other kids who are trapped like I was. Kids who don't know how to fight back or don't have anyone who believes them. What do you mean? I want to create a program where kids can report abuse directly to federal agents, not just local police who might be corrupted. And I want to teach kids how to document evidence and plan escapes if they need to. Emma had turned her trauma into a mission to protect others. Agent Chen looked at me. Mrs. Wells, you should know that Emma's uncle David has been cleared for custody. The paperwork will be finalized within the week, and you'll both be relocated to Oregon under new identities for your protection. New identities. The network Emma exposed had connections across multiple states. Until we're sure we've arrested everyone involved, you'll both need federal protection. Emma looked excited about this prospect. We get to choose new names. Within reason, yes. Can I be Emma Rodriguez for real this time? I like that name. Emma had already been thinking ahead, planning for the next phase of her life. As the day wore on, I watched my granddaughter interact with federal agents, prosecutors, and victim advocates. She answered their questions with precision, provided additional details they hadn't thought to ask for, and offered insights into the criminal operation that helped them understand how it had functioned for so long. Emma wasn't just a victim who'd escaped. She was a key witness whose testimony would help convict dozens of criminals and save countless other children. But more than that, she was a survivor who'd refused to let her circumstances define her future. Late that afternoon, as we prepared to leave for Oregon, Agent Chen pulled me aside. "Mrs. Wells, I want you to understand something. What Emma accomplished is extraordinary. Not just the escape, but the investigation, the evidence gathering, the strategic thinking. Most trained investigators couldn't have done what she did." "She's remarkable," I agreed. "But she's also 10 years old, and she's been carrying an impossible burden for years. Now that she's safe, she's going to need help processing all of this. The transition from survival mode to normal childhood isn't always smooth." I nodded, understanding what she was telling me. Emma's going to need time to learn how to be a regular kid. She's been functioning as an adult out of necessity, but now she has the chance to actually have a childhood. As we walked toward the car that would take us to the airport, I looked at Emma chattering excitedly about our new life in Oregon, about starting school under a new name, about maybe getting a dog and learning to ride a bicycle and all the normal things she'd never had the chance to dream about before. I realized that while this story had started with revenge, with my desire to protect Emma from her mother, it had ended with something more powerful than revenge. It had ended with justice. Emma hadn't just escaped from her abuser. She'd ensured that Cassandra could never hurt another child. She'd brought down an entire criminal network. She turned her own suffering into protection for countless other children. That night, as our plane flew west toward Oregon and toward our new lives, Emma fell asleep against my shoulder for the first time since I'd known her. Really asleep, not the tense, watchful half-sleep she'd maintained for years. As I watched her sleep, I made a promise to myself and to her. I would spend the rest of my life helping Emma learn how to be a child again. I would make sure she had the chance to play and laugh and make mistakes and dream about the future without fear. And I would never underestimate her again. Because Emma had taught me that sometimes the smallest people are capable of changing the world. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, watching Emma, now officially Emma Rodriguez, play chess with a retired professor named Harold who comes in every Tuesday afternoon. She's beating him, of course. Emma approaches chess the same way she approached escaping from her mother, with careful analysis, strategic thinking, and patience that seems impossible for someone her age. But she's also laughing at Harold's jokes and complaining about having to eat vegetables with dinner and asking if she can stay up late on Friday to watch movies with her Uncle David. For the first time since I've known her, Emma is acting like a child and thinking like a child and planning like a child. What she wants for her birthday, which classes she wants to take next year, whether she should join the soccer team or the debate club. The transition hasn't been easy. For the first month after we arrived in Oregon, Emma barely slept. She'd gotten so used to being hypervigilant, to constantly watching for danger, that she couldn't relax even in Uncle David's safe, warm house. She'd check the locks on the doors multiple times each night. She'd wake up in panic if she heard unexpected sounds. She'd hoard food in her room, even though we assured her over and over that she would never go hungry again. The therapy sessions were difficult too. Emma had spent years learning to suppress her emotions, to be compliant and quiet and invisible. Learning to express anger and fear and sadness in healthy ways was like learning a foreign language. But slowly, gradually, she started to heal. The first breakthrough came when she realized she could be angry about what had happened to her without having to fix it herself. For years, Emma had carried the impossible burden of trying to solve the problem of her abuse single-handedly. Learning that adults, trustworthy adults, could handle the big problems while she focused on being a kid was revolutionary for her. The second breakthrough came when she started school under her new identity. Emma had been so afraid that her classmates would somehow sense that she was different, that she was damaged. Instead, she discovered that she was just a smart, funny, slightly serious kid who was good at math and terrible at art class and scared of the cafeteria pizza like everyone else. Making friends was the third breakthrough. Emma had never had real friendships before. Cassandra had made sure of that. But in Portland, she met kids who invited her to birthday parties and sleepovers, who texted her about homework assignments, who treated her like a normal sixth grader. Emma was amazed to discover that friendship could be easy and fun instead of strategic and careful. Uncle David has been incredible through all of this. He's everything Emma said he was: kind, patient, committed to giving her the childhood she should have had all along. He's also been wonderful to me, welcoming me into his home and his life without question, treating me like family instead of an obligation. David is a social worker who specializes in trauma recovery for children, which means he understood exactly what Emma needed in ways that I was still learning. He knew how to set boundaries that felt safe instead of restrictive. He knew how to encourage Emma's natural leadership abilities while also teaching her that she didn't have to be responsible for everything and everyone around her. Most importantly, he knew how to help Emma process her anger about what Cassandra had done without letting that anger consume her. Anger is like fire, I heard him tell Emma one afternoon when she was struggling with nightmares about her mother. It can keep you warm and give you light, but if you let it burn everything down, you'll be left with nothing but ashes. Emma took that advice to heart. She channeled her anger into advocacy work, volunteering with organizations that help children escape abusive situations. She wrote letters to lawmakers about improving child protection services. She even testified before a congressional committee about the need for better federal oversight of interstate child welfare cases. But she also learned to let go of the anger when it wasn't serving her. She learned to play and laugh and be silly. She learned that she could have bad days without having to fix them immediately. She learned that healing isn't linear and that's okay. The updates on Cassandra's case have been regular and satisfying. She was convicted on all federal charges and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Dr. Richards received 20 years in exchange for his cooperation. The entire trafficking network was dismantled, with arrests spanning across 12 states and 4 countries. Most importantly, 31 of the 37 children who'd been trafficked through the network have been recovered and reunited with safe family members or placed with carefully vetted foster families. The investigations are ongoing for the remaining 6, but Agent Chen is optimistic about finding them. Emma follows these updates with the same careful attention she once applied to documenting abuse, but now it's from a place of justice rather than fear. She's proud of the role she played in stopping the trafficking network, but she's also able to compartmentalize it as something that happened to her rather than something that defines her. I used to be the kid whose mom tried to sell her, Emma told me recently. But now I'm the kid who plays chess and likes science class and thinks pineapple on pizza is gross. The bad stuff that happened is just part of my story, not the whole story. That perspective didn't come easily. It took months of therapy, patience, setbacks, and breakthroughs. But Emma has learned to see herself as more than a survivor. She's learned to see herself as a whole person with interests and dreams and opinions that have nothing to do with what Cassandra did to her. As for me, I've had my own healing to do. I spent years feeling guilty about not recognizing the signs of Emma's abuse sooner, about not acting more decisively when I first suspected something was wrong. The therapy I've done, both individually and with Emma, has helped me understand that I did the best I could with the information I had, and that ultimately, I did help save her. I've also had to learn how to be a grandmother to a child who's been functioning as an adult, how to provide appropriate support without treating her as fragile or broken. Emma needed me to see her as capable and strong, but she also needed me to create space for her to be young and inexperienced and still learning about the world. Finding that balance has been one of the most important things I've ever done. Today, watching Emma play chess and joke with Harold, I see a child who's been through hell and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than most adults I know. But I also see a kid who gets excited about snow days and complains about doing dishes and wants to learn how to braid friendship bracelets. Emma has kept her promise to help other children who are trapped in impossible situations. She's consulted on several federal cases, providing insights into how traffickers manipulate and control child victims. She's helped design educational programs that teach children how to recognize abuse and seek help safely. But she's also kept her promise to herself to finally have a real childhood. Last week, she asked if she could take guitar lessons. Not because it would be useful for survival or protection or evidence gathering, but because she heard a song on the radio and thought it sounded pretty. When I said yes, she grinned and hugged me and said, "I love how normal problems feel now. Like, my biggest worry is whether I'll be good at guitar or if I should try piano instead. That's such a nice problem to have." That's when I knew Emma was really going to be okay. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, if you've listened to everything Emma and I went through to get here, I need you to understand something important. This story isn't really about revenge, even though that's how it started. It's about the power of believing in someone, especially when that someone is small and scared and has been told they're broken. It's about the fact that children are often smarter and stronger and more capable than we give them credit for, and sometimes the best thing we can do for them is trust them to know what they need. It's about the truth that healing is possible, even from the worst trauma, but it takes time and patience and the kind of love that doesn't try to fix everything immediately. And it's about the reality that sometimes running away is the bravest thing you can do, and sometimes the smallest person in the room is the one who can save everyone else. Emma saved me just as much as I saved her. She taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. She showed me that love sometimes means making hard choices that hurt in the short term but protect in the long term. Most importantly, she proved that evil might be powerful, but it's never as powerful as the combination of intelligence, determination, and the refusal to give up hope. If you know a child who seems too mature for their age, who flinches at unexpected touch, who has explanations for injuries that don't quite add up, please listen to your instincts. Please ask questions. Please believe them if they tell you something is wrong. And if you're a child watching this who's trapped in an impossible situation, please know that you're not alone. Please know that there are adults who will believe you and help you and fight for you. Please know that what's happening to you is not your fault and not your responsibility to fix. Emma wants you to know that you're stronger than you realize, smarter than they've told you, and deserving of safety and love and the chance to just be a kid. As I finish telling you this story, Emma is across the coffee shop, celebrating her victory over Harold with a chocolate chip cookie and planning her next move in the chess tournament she's entering next month. She's exactly where she should be, safe, loved, and free to dream about a future that belongs entirely to her. Comment below if this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the children in your life, or if it reminded you that sometimes the most unlikely people are capable of extraordinary things. And please share this story. Not for me, but for Emma, and for all the children out there who are still waiting for someone to believe them, someone to listen, someone to help them find their way to safety. Because every child deserves the chance to discover who they really are when they're not afraid.